Why were you arrested at the weekend?
I was there to represent the community at a meeting with the Department of Mineral Resources and the Minister that had been arranged by the department on very short notice. The community that's affected by the proposed mining had not been consulted and were given notice, were not consulted on the agenda or the meeting or the program at all. But we decided nonetheless to participate. But when we got to the meeting venue, we were kept out by armed policemen, riot policemen, and only allowed in after the marquee where the meeting was to be held had been packed with pro-mining supporters, bussed in from outside Xolobeni, from inland, and far removed from the land that's going to be subject to this mining right. That caused some trouble, and people were singing and protesting, and I was asked by an official of the DMR to intervene to try and bring the situation under control, restore peace so that the minister could speak and the proceedings could continue. I attempted to do so by bringing in chairs, arranging for chairs, and arranging for community leaders to address the community and to call for quiet. But then the police brought in a line of policemen who went into the marquee and effectively formed a human wall between the community and everybody else who was present. I approached the general in charge, a general in SWAT, and suggested to him that this wasn't particularly helpful and urged him to withdraw the police so that we could restore order, get calm, get people seated, and continue. He simply refused to engage. He said to me, "I'm not prepared to entertain any of your proposals." And he and I had an argument about this. I told him that I was doing this on behalf of the community and at the specific request of the DMR, and, he really ought to be cooperating and working with us. At one stage, he then told one of his men to remove me from the premises, and I said, "Enough's enough." I went into the marquee and I approached the minister to engage with him. The minister and I know each other. We go back a very long way to when he was still the General Secretary of the NUM, and we had greeted each other very cordially earlier that morning. The minister called me forward, but as I approached him, I was grabbed by the police. I was roughed up, hauled away, and arrested by the general on charges of inciting public violence.
Why didn't the minister intervene?
Which is preposterous.
Why did Minister Mantashe not intervene, Mr. Spoor?
Well, he subsequently, after I was arrested, he came out to intervene. I asked him to direct the police to let me go. I emphasized that I was trying to work with the DMR and the community and try and get order. But the minister's attitude was that this was a police matter and he could not intervene. Subsequently, the police drove all of the local residents out of the meeting and forced them back and away. And the meeting continued without the presence of any representatives of the local community. No representation, no speaking terms for the people whose land stands to be taken away from them if this mining right is granted.
Just the way that you've told this story, Mr. Spoor, of course, from your point of view, sounds like the police were essentially put up to ensuring that the community members who are opposed to mining in that area, those community members should not have been in that meeting, and the police made sure of that. Is that your reading of the situation?
That is certainly the impression that I got from the conduct of the police and my dealings with General Swart, that he was determined to ensure that they could not participate in this meeting.
Talk to me about the presence of someone called Inkosi Zanozugo Sigcau at this meeting, which it is said was highly provocative. Who is he, and why is he a provocative person in as far as that situation there is concerned?
The Nhlapo Commission of Inquiry into Traditional Leadership and Disputes made a ruling some years ago that Zanazuku Sigcau was the legitimate king of the Pondos. Now, he is not recognized by this community, whose allegiance lies with the Queen, who's the regent, and that family. That issue is winding its way through the courts. But the king is also very closely associated with mining. He has given his written consent, and his chief advisor is also the sole director of the BEE component of the mine. So there's a company called K-Share Investments, and the king's advisor is the sole director of that company. So he is very, very closely associated with the mining, as is the local Chief Baleni, who is also being rewarded and paid off by the mining company for his support. And in fact, that pattern of paying off local political and traditional leaders is a practice of this Australian company, MRC, and many local politicians, leaders, and business people have been paid off, if you like, to support mining locally.
So as things stand at the moment, Mr. Spoor, my understanding is that there is a moratorium on mining in as far as the area of Xolobeni is concerned. Your understanding of the final word of the Minister Mantashe? First of all, what was he there to do? And ultimately, what was his message to that community before he left?
You know, there are people who are not directly affected by the mining activities. People living inland who are jobless, hungry, and unemployed. And there's no question that many of those people support mining. They hope that they will get jobs. They hope that they will get contracts and work and benefit. Our concern is for the people themselves, whose land it is and whose living, whose way of life, whose everything is based on this land. We believe that they have a right to say no to mining. They are the people with the most to lose, and it should be up to them to determine this. The minister's message is basically he wants to see growth and development, and it appears that he's willing to ride roughshod over the landowners, the people whose land this is, in his endeavors to achieve mining and the jobs and investment that he hopes will flow from it. You know, we think that's wrong, and there is litigation currently before the High Court about the community's right to say no to mining. It's their lives that will be disrupted, they who will be displaced. They are the people who will pay the price for mining, and it's only right that they are the people whose interests should prevail.